Cultural Competence and Race Discussion, Series 2, where we'll be talking about inclusion, two subparts, which will be privilege and allyship. We have a really good group here that will be talking with us today about these different matters and different issues that will come out of it. I will say we'd like to thank all our panelists, but also want to thank you as participants to join us this this afternoon and sharing with us some experiences that we're going to be talking about today. Mainly, I think part of it is that the more we discuss things like this and educate ourselves, the better we're able to do better and find better ways to be better allies to one another, but more importantly, be better citizens across the board. As we kind of jump into this here, please understand if you have any questions, anything, please send those questions or comments or anything through our chat room, and we will get those and then we'll try to answer those. If we don't have enough time, we'll follow back up with you on that as well. So today we have a cast of folks who are from TDOT and also folks who are from outside of TDOT, but are also state employees here with the great state of Tennessee. My first guest is Dr. Marianne Wanmaker, and she's with the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. Marianne, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, Vince. I appreciate that. Yes, I am an associate professor of economics at UT. I've been here for 11 years, and I study race in the labor market, mostly from a historical perspective. So looking at the labor market status of Black men and women from 1865 emancipation through today. So, and it's a great pleasure to be here. I am excited, and I anticipate learning a lot.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Marianne. Marianne and I were on a panel several months ago where we met, and it was a great experience meeting with her and working with her then. Also, I met this person just a few weeks ago, Bridget Jones. She's a curator with the Tennessee State Museum. Bridget, would you like to share who you are and what you've done? I think you're on mute.
There we go. Hi, everyone. Yes, my name is Bridget Jones, and I'm the curator of social history for the Tennessee State Museum. I look at race from a historical perspective as well. I'm very big on studying the effects of enslavement long term. So how is slavery still affecting our world and our communities today? But most people know me from my work at the Bellmead Plantation, where I served as Director of African American Studies. I'm happy to be here.
Hey, thank you, Bridget. Appreciate you. And now to our TDOT family. We have a whole host of group here. We're going to start off with the person who said he has the longest introduction in all of TDOT history. That is Steve Allen. Steve, welcome.
Thank you, Vince. Good afternoon, everybody, and I appreciate the invitation, Vince. A little bit about me. I'm the director of the Strategic Transportation Investments Division at TDOT. I've only been with the department 44 years, so I'm still learning about what we do. And but if you have a question, they usually call me first. So I have a couple of degrees, most importantly, a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Tennessee State University. So I actually attended the main campus full-time, 77, 78, and 81, 82. And back at that time, I was actually a minority because I was only one of two engineering students that happen to be white. So I've got to experience being a minority in that world for a couple of years. Unfortunately, I also experienced some racism just because I was white. But, you know, that's okay. I met a lot of good people. I learned so much about life and got a good education. I also realized that not everybody's going to like you anyway. So it doesn't matter that much about, you know, who you are. It's your character that matters. And I'll give you an example. I got out of my truck in the parking garage one day, and this young man got out of his, and I introduced myself, and we just started talking, and we talked all the way to the building. Realized from that first moment that I was going to have somebody that I could always go to, build a relationship with, and be friends. And that young man just happened to be Mr. Vince Vallone. So Vince, other than being a Gator fan, I really like you.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it, man. Our next person that we have here on our panelist is Jermaine Scales. Jermaine, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, actually. My name is Jermaine Scales. I am the Assistant Director of Information Technology at TDOT. Also a TSU graduate, degree in Electrical Engineering and Computer Science. Don't nearly have as much to say about myself as Steve did, but I'm happy to be here. I've been with TDOT for about 10 years now, and hopefully I can add something important to the conversation.
Outstanding. Hey, appreciate it. Thank you, Jermaine. Our next person is not a person that I think no one really knows who she is. Is Shari Hal Crowder. Sheree, give us a little bit of info about you as well. Sheree, I think you're on mute. Hello? Sheree? Uh-oh. Sheree, I think you're on mute.
I'm unmuted. Okay. Well, hello, everybody, again. Good afternoon. I'm Shari Hal Crowder. I am the EEO Affirmative Action Director with the Civil Rights Division. I've been with TDOT for about 16 years, and I am so excited to be a part of this discussion today. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of this panel, Vince.
Great. Thank you, Sheree. And our last person that we have currently that's on the call right now is Giuliana Guillaume. Giuliana, would you like to give us a little info about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Vince. My name is Giuliana Guillaume. I go by G for some people at TDOT, but I work in TDOT Human Resources as an HR generalist. I do a lot of different things with HR, recruiting and hiring and special projects. But one of the biggest roles I've had in the last 2 years is probably working on the diversity project with Dr. Stephanie Ivey. So I'm really excited to be here, and I really appreciate the opportunity. So thank you, Vince.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate you being on board as well. We have one other person that will probably be joining us a little bit later, and that's Dr. Stephanie Ivey. Dr. Ivey is having some communication issues right now, but we're working on those and getting that taken care of here. But we'll kind of jump into our discussion a little bit here and see how things kind of go. Dr. Ivey is the Associate Dean of Research at the University of Memphis. She's at the Hurst College of Engineering. So when she joins us here shortly, we'll kind of add her to our conversation. To kind of get things started, we're going to kind of start in two different areas. Again, if you have any questions or comments or anything, please send that also through the chat room. We're going to start with one section of our discussion, which is on privilege. And then we'll move in the second half of our hour, we'll move into allyship. And we kind of composed both of those under our inclusion umbrella, just to kind of start looking and creating a little bit of more discussion. So as we kind of get into this first question, as we look at privilege, what we consider are the advantages that provide more or better opportunities to one race over the other. And so I'm going to kind of throw that out there to you, Miss Bridget Jones, and see if that's something that you can kind of start us off with.
Absolutely. So when I read over this question, I was like, man, these are some good questions. So if you, for instance, kind of look at the 1998 passing of the Employment Equality Act, which gave us affirmative action, we begin to look at a history of Black and brown people kind of not being able to have the same equal opportunities because they had to pass a law so that we would have equal opportunities. So I think that alone kind of shows you what that privilege is, the fact that one set of people had to have laws passed to even have a job. Now, does this mean that everyone with privilege is wealthy? I think there's been a misconstruing of what privilege really is. Privilege is just being afforded opportunities that other people don't have.
Great. Steve, as you kind of look at things in your perspective, and you had an interesting comment toward the beginning there. When I answer that question about, is provide more or better opportunities for one race over the other, what are kind of your thoughts on that?
Oh, my experience is a lot to do with who you know as much as it is what you know. when I listened to our last panel, someone was talking about being passed over for a position. And I can tell you that's happened to me during my career. Of course, during 44 years, that's going to happen. And it had nothing to do with my race. It had to do with the supervisor just didn't like me. So, you know, I chose at that point to look at it as, well, I'm just going to change my career path. I'm not going to get mad about it. I'm just going to try harder, not consider the circumstances, and go for it, you know. And so I know from my experience when I supervise and manage on how to actually handle that situation. So I don't want to treat anybody like that because I didn't like being treated like that. So I think it comes back to a lot of that about who you know and what is that situation.
Gotcha. Dr. Wanmaker, on that same question, how, when you look at the advantages that you provide for more or better opportunities for one race or the other, what else is it there? How does it exist within the organization, and this type of pattern and also belief?
So my specialty is not organizations, and I work for the University of Tennessee, which we have our problems, but we try hard. And I actually think about it more as a status of society, a way society operates. And in my own research, I've been doing a lot of work on kind of tracing out the pattern of the progress of Black men in the labor market for the last 150 years. And I won't give you I'm not going to sit here and read my dissertation to you, but what I will say is that there have been these points along the way where, like Bridget was saying, the government has stepped in and said, gosh, this is not right, we're going to fix this. So you can think about the integration of schools as one, a huge moment, right? And you can think about the Civil Rights Act as the other sort of huge moment that said, okay, you can no longer discriminate against people based on their race. It turns out that neither of those things were very important in terms of changing the trajectory of labor market status of Black men. They didn't end up mattering all that much, not nearly as much as you might have thought. And so when I think about privilege, what I think about is that there's a whole constellation of things that society does that pushes down certain individuals, including those who, including a sort of racial categories. And my privilege as a white person is that those are never directed at me, neither directly or indirectly, right? Do they come to bite me? And instead, the sort of constellation of actions on the part of society is directed elsewhere. The most recent example of that is that, after the 1965 Civil Rights Act, and it doesn't end up making that big of a difference, and people go back in and they say, okay, I'm surprised, right? Why do I not see much more progress among Black men after 1965? And the answer is that we switched our focus. We stopped with the labor market discrimination and we started with the criminal justice stuff, right? And so, and that's how privilege works, right? Is that it kind of, I escaped all of that, and there are other people in our society for whom all of that is directed directly at them. I apologize for the dog in advance.
I guess that was him saying thumbs up. Good answer. Thank you, Dr. Wanmaker. As we kind of go to the next question, how do you think privilege of one group becomes kind of the barometer of equal treatment for kind of all people? So Jermaine, I'm going to kind of throw that one out to you and just see what your perspective is on that as well.
Well, I think it kind of comes down to taking things away from people. If you've established a certain bar for a group of people to define equality or to create a level playing field, it's never going to be easy to remove rights or activities or abilities or privilege from one group to make the field equal. You'll have to add to the other. So the barometer gets established based on what the status quo is for those who have power, and then trying to pull the people who don't have power into that same level.
Thank you, sir. As we kind of look at those scenarios, Sheree, you and I kind of talk a little bit about some of the work that you do in that area. what is it that you've kind of seen that, kind of looks at that privilege piece there with one group over the other? Sheree, I think you're on mute.
Okay. I'm I think, sorry, I'm here. So as it relates to privilege being and over another, I think that what is important, especially with TDOT, is that it exists, but we have the support from the top. We have the support from our commissioner and our executive team down. So we're very fortunate here to have that support. And with that support, we will continue to take proactive measures to ensure EEO and diversity in our workforce. And we would do that by having activities like this so that we can have open dialogues and better understandings of what the privileges are, and work together so that we can find ways to address that and to ensure equality for all our employees.
Okay, thanks, Sheree. Dr. Ivey, glad to have you on board. I'm sorry about the mix-up there with the links there, but I think you're glad to have you on board. The question we had just a minute ago was kind of talking about how did privilege of one group become kind of the barometer of equal treatment for all people. Can you kind of help us with that piece of it and what your work and study has kind of shown?
Sure, I'll be glad to try. So I think one of the main things to keep in mind with all of this is that it requires that we really start thinking about how we interact with one another, and not just in the workplace, but in every aspect of our lives. And I think that a lot of people maybe struggle with understanding what privilege and allyship might mean. And so if you think about it from a broader context, pretty much everybody has had this experience in one way or another. And it's trying to draw from that to then help to understand how do we start to think about what does it really mean for everybody to have equal access and equal opportunity. So for example, it may be that you haven't experienced this from the standpoint of race, but you might have experienced it from the standpoint of gender, or from the standpoint of economic status, or from the standpoint of educational achievement. So thinking about that context and trying to understand what that might have done to you personally, and then using that to think about how does this impact other people, is probably one of the most effective ways for people to start building that understanding and then working together to address any discrepancies that might exist.
Thank you, appreciate it. And would you like to let everybody know what you do with the University of Memphis and all that? Like I said, you kind of missed the introduction. I apologize for that. Let everybody know who Dr. Stephanie Ivey is.
Sure, no problem. So hi, everybody. I'm Stephanie Ivey. I am the Associate Dean for Research in the College of Engineering at the University of Memphis, but I direct the Southeast Transportation Workforce Center, and so do a whole lot of work related to transportation workforce research, and specifically related to diversity. And I've been working on a project with TDOT related to this.
Yes, you sure are. Thank you so much.
Hey, Vince, I just wanted to pop in on that last one, if that was okay.
Sure.
I think when you try to talk about how did the barometer kind of be set to where one group has this privilege that the other group doesn't, I think it's always important to, again, look at the history. If you want to look at the history of both colonialism and colonization, then that kind of sets a foundation for the privilege of one set of people over another. And that's not just an American problem. Colonization hit every country in the world technically. And what you see is that usually the native people of each country are usually kind of at the bottom of the class level system. So it's important to look at the history. That the barometer was set way before we ever had an option to kind of fight the battle.
Good point. Appreciate it. Thank you, Bridget. So and since I have you here, Bridget, is privilege based upon a person's race alone, or is it more socioeconomic toward privilege? What's your thoughts?
I don't think it's based on race alone. I think race plays a very large part of it, but I don't think it's based on race alone. Definitely socioeconomics, class, education levels, education accessibility. Goes all the way down into the schools that you're able to attend in both grade school and then on into college. So no, not just race.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. When I kind of looked at this question, Dr. Wanmaker, I was thinking of you. So I'm going to see if you can open it up, and then I'm going to jump to a couple other folks.
Well, I've been thinking about something very silly, which is that I remember a feeling I had one time in a group of people who had all gone to Ivy League colleges, and I did not. I went to Vanderbilt, and I found myself apologizing for having gone to this wonderful school, and in a room of people who had gone to even better schools. And so when Stephanie said that about, it can be based on all sorts of things. I mean, what a ridiculous thing, right? And yet the feeling that I felt, I will never forget, because I was so frustrated and so angry and, just annoyed that mattered to somebody. Back to your question about, is it just based on race? So it isn't just based on race, but it's also the case that it's far worse to be, or it's a far more difficult position to be in, to be a low socioeconomic status Black person in this country than to be a low socioeconomic status white person in this country. And that's those are just sort of economic facts, that it's much harder for you if your parents, if you're born into a family, a low income family, and you're white, the probability that you eventually reach middle class is much higher than being born into that same economic class and being Black. It's just, it is a different experience. And it's been that way, again, I know I keep talking about this, but it's been that way for 150 years. I mean, it has always been that way. So again, back to Bridget's point about, like, we set the barometer a long time ago. It's very true. Class matters, but race matters more.
Gotcha.
Vince, can I make one statement, please?
Sure, please go right ahead. You're the next guy anyway.
I do think that one of the things we struggle with is when we tie things exclusively to race, the problem we get is we immediately alienate people that don't want to talk about race. Race is definitely an important factor. As a Black man, I get that, trust me. But we also, to sometimes create that allyship that we're going to talk about later on, you have to make people experience the same level of, have those experiences in other areas, right? So gender. When you think about the disadvantage of being a woman, if you think about the disadvantage of being poor or whatever, those things help other people who may not be comfortable recognizing or accepting the plight of a person who's a minority, realize those plights exist across the board, and that the efforts they make toward normalizing the experience benefit other groups besides a racial group, and in turn give you a greater power in trying to address those issues. So while, like you said, it's not just about race, it's socioeconomic, it's gender, it's education based. There are tons of variances that people have based on membership to a group that gets them some level of benefit based on no real work or merit they've earned themselves, that we have to acknowledge and identify that impact everyone, not just Black men and women, not just women, not just poor people.
So my next question is, how can a person recognize if they kind of fall into that group that has privilege? Dr. Ivey, can you kind of start us off with that?
Well, I think if we think of it from an organizational standpoint, it's generally going to be people that are in leadership positions that might recognize it most readily. But we all may have levels of privilege that don't necessarily associate with that. It might be that you're the person within your team that is, the one that really kind of leads from the standpoint of your personality, and so you're the one that tries to pull people together, and you may not actually be in a leadership position, but you're the one that kind of gets the conversations flowing and helps to facilitate group activities within your team. And so I think really everybody can be in a position of privilege. It's just thinking about where you have levels of influence, even if it's small. Because if we all address that from whatever point that we're able to contribute, then, that's what really makes the biggest change and allows us to have cultural shifts.
Great. Julian, I saw you nodding your head there, so I'm going to pick on you. Can you kind of add to that context as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that each of us has an identity that shapes how we see ourselves and others, and I think social norms and culture can influence experience, and the differences can be really difficult to understand. And I think that privilege isn't always visible to someone, which is why I think that self-discovery and really taking the time to determine how you truly feel and what you believe without following the social norm or even the opinions of others, but by really assessing your own culture and prioritizing the learning of other cultures and understanding differences, I think it can ultimately help you see your own privilege. But I definitely agreed, and I like where Stephanie was going with that, so I just wanted to chime in there.
So is that kind of like, is that by being an advocate, or is that by being a mentor? Steve, can you kind of add to that?
Yeah, Vince, in my world, perception's reality. What happens is some people think I'm privileged because of the position I'm in. So, and I'm always, when I'm interviewing someone and they're being promoted and they're moving from a worker position into a supervisor position, into a manager position, I tell them that you say you're not going to change who you are, how you act, but you end up doing that because the people that are under you end up changing the way that they think about you, the way that they feel about you. They often feel like you are privileged to be in that position. So what I do, I just open up and let them sit down and talk. You have to be open-minded and listen to their point of view, and then explain to them what it takes to be in that position. Going back to what Jermaine said, it has a whole lot to do with all those differences. For instance, my dad raised 4 children on minimum wage. I was the only one that was able to go to college, but that was only because I was willing to go out and work my way through college. It took 9 years. So, it's one of those things that you're only limited by your own ambitions, and those people have to understand that. And I always tell someone, if you want it, you can get it if you just want to try hard enough, put in the work, and be willing to put that effort out there. And I try to help everybody that comes into my office and talks about that. And I've often told them, you're not really going down the path that you really want to succeed. And so if they look in the mirror, oftentimes they can realize that. And that's how I try to just be open and honest with people.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Dr. Wanmaker, if you are a person that has recognized that you have privilege within yourself, how can you help others without privilege?
Good question. So I think about privilege. Stephanie was saying kind of like I have power in this situation, or I have influence. Influence, I think, is the word she used. And I think about it a little bit differently, maybe, which is that I often think about, am I making choices here that other people couldn't make? Right. And so, I often think about it with our junior faculty members who are working every day with a group of people who will eventually vote on their tenure to the university. And they have no influence. And there are a bunch of, sitting in a meeting, right, there are a bunch of things that they can't say. But I can say it because I'm tenured, I'm here. And so, if there are choices that I can make that other people can't make, but that ultimately influence the outcome and are good for people, right, then it's my responsibility to think about that, consciously think about what choices can I make that others can't, that move the ball forward. And in that way, you're acting on someone else's behalf, and they don't have to ask you to do that, right? I think you just sort of have to intuit what it is that the person across the table is thinking and wish they could say and can't. And then you say it. And you take whatever blowback there is.
Great. Hey, thank you. Sheree, you and I talked about this a few weeks ago. Give me your take on I guess the audience know kind of what your take is on that.
I think if a person recognizes privilege within themselves and how you can help others with privilege, I think you do that by being an ally for them. I think that it's very important that you learn what the challenges are that they face, the challenges that they face at work and in their communities. And then look for those opportunities to speak out and even act on behalf of those individuals that are underprivileged. Talk about the lack of diversity, ask questions, raise issues. By conducting outreach in communities and within work, like as within yacht, with various different activities and events. Like at TDOT, we have our diversity fair, where we learn about the backgrounds and cultures of our employees. And we just need to talk to others and understand what the issues are that they face.
Okay, thank you, Sheree. Now, as we kind of move forward into the kind of next section of the discussion here, allyship. And Dr. Ivey, I'm going to ask you that question, since you're kind of working on our diversity plan and what we're going to be looking at it within our study there. What is allyship? What does that mean to the person that works here at TDOT, the person that's out there in the community here in Nashville or in Memphis or wherever here in Tennessee? What is allyship?
I think sort of the best way to describe it is really looking at how you can help promote equality for everyone. And so in terms of thinking about the tenure example was a perfect one. Thinking about where people that you might work with or that you might interact with might not have the same opportunity as you do because of whatever position you might be in or whatever group you're associated with that is allowing you to have more access. Think about how you can then extend that to someone else. And so it's looking for ways that you can not necessarily just be a mentor, but how can you stand up for somebody else, and how can you put forward ideas for organizational change that can really support diversity and inclusion across the board. So I think, and I think you have to really think about how impactful you can be in doing that. I know, just a very quick example, when I started on the faculty at the U of M, I was the first and only female in my department for 16 years. And particularly when I was in the tenure process, that was a really lonely time for me, and quite disheartening on many occasions. And, realizing that there were so many things that I was never going to be able to address, and there were things that I couldn't say anything about. And I just had to kind of decide, was I going to take it and still try to move forward, or what was I going to do? And it was one person in our department who was the scariest, most senior in terms of age, person in the entire department, and he seemed so incredibly gruff and just so like, I was terrified of him. And he was the one that ended up being my biggest ally. And he was the one that stood up for me and that, said, hey, this isn't right. We shouldn't be doing this and things like that. And he made such a huge difference. I would never have stayed had it not been for him. And so I think, realizing that allies come in so many forms. They may not look like you. They may not think like you. And you don't have to be the same for them to be able to be incredibly impactful. And so looking at how you can do that for other people at whatever capacity or level that you're at, I think is just crucial.
Thank you, Dr. Ivey. Part of that question is, I'm going to throw it over to you, Jermaine. What is it to be an ally within kind of a diversity and an inclusion framework, kind of like we have here at TDOT, and within our organization, especially during a period where there's racial inequality at the forefront currently?
Well, so as you know, at TDOT, there's always going to be support from the senior team to do some different things, which gives me some freedom there. But in my role, I've had people come and ask me questions or approach me with concerns about what's going on around us, right? A lot of people have not experienced or are not aware of the type of tension that we're currently dealing with. And so I've used examples, and this is one that may help. A young lady asked me, what my opinion of the existing situation with the state of race was in Nashville. And I said, well, I'll give you an example. I'm sure that we all think of ourselves as being open-minded, fairly diverse people in how we approach and deal with people. So if you saw a man or an adult taking advantage of a child or abusing a woman, would you step up and stop them? And she was like, of course. And I said, if a man walked by and witnessed that happening and didn't step in and stop it, what would you think of them? And she was like, well, I coward. And there were several words that came up to describe that kind of situation. I said, so now think about a person who's a minority who has people that they trust, respect, work with on a daily basis, who witness these things happen, but don't have the courage to step up and make a difference about them, who don't use their power to affect a better change for others. How does that change the relationship that they have with them? How does that affect their perception of that person? I said, I was like, that is a problem that you have to deal with, because now not only have you created a situation where the initial problem isn't addressed, you've now affected the trust, you've now affected the relationship between those people who are involved, because there's a respect factor that's now been tarnished in the same process. And I think having those kind of conversations that may not be easy conversations help people change their perception of what they're responsible for and how they can be an ally and what they can do in the environment. But those are conversations that, like you said, I can have at my level, but a person who is a few levels down from me maybe can't say to someone, and so I have to be willing to have those conversations and do the things that may be uncomfortable for other people at my level, and have the courage to hope that, people take it for what it's worth.
Sounds good. Bridget, same question. What's your thoughts on that?
I kind of agree in the same sentiment. I believe that when you start to look at I guess when you talk about allyship and how a person can be an ally and what that actually means, I think you just really have to address the fact that you have, like you said, have to be able to go to bat for people that could not go to bat for themselves. You have to literally be willing to kind of put your neck on the line for somebody else. I know with my own position, I have to be an ally for Black, Latin, and Middle Eastern people because my job is social history. I'm not Latin and I'm not Middle Eastern. I don't know their history, but I feel like it needs to be represented. So I have to go into meetings and make sure that those communities are equally represented within the Tennessee State Museum on a regular basis. That means going out and finding people from that community to come in and tell their own story, because I don't feel it's right that I tell the Latin community story. That's not my story to tell. So it's putting yourself in a vulnerable position so that someone else can rise and help their own community. Just help somebody.
Makes sense. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
As an ally, what things must be done by a person to make sure they effectuate change? And so, Giuliana, what do you think are some of those things that we need to kind of look at to effectuate change in our environment?
Sure. So first, for me, when I think of ally, I think of someone who supports and who stands up for others and takes action. And so as an ally, you want to have positive and productive outcomes, and change can be a challenge. So I think that really challenging yourself and encouraging others to question and challenge the system and the norm can be efficient. And having those constructive conversations on privilege and even prejudice, and especially encouraging people to be mindful of others. If you see or hear something, speak up. And I think that takes courage too. And it involves stepping outside your comfort zone. And you talked about being a mentor or being an advocate, and I think that's important. And to be an ally is really to challenge or question. And I think that as diversity goes, to be an ally for diversity, you have to be a champion for change. And so I think that there's an opportunity to be allies more than we realize.
Okay. Thank you, Giuliana. Dr. Wanmaker, same question. As an ally, what things must a person be able to do to kind of effectuate and bring change?
Well, one of the things I've been thinking about in the last few minutes is just how important it is to know not just what a person needs for themselves. So I make a relationship at work and I understand what barriers this person individually is facing, but also to understand the broader issues, not just like, Stephanie was talking about, like, not just am I going to face hurdles in the tenure process, right? My specific needs, but the generic needs of people like me. And that takes a lot of listening. And I can't, for example, I can develop a relationship with somebody that I already work with and understand their specific needs. And that's as easy as going to lunch and listening. But if I'm thinking about trying to hire faculty, new faculty to UT, diverse faculty, it's not about an individual, it's about a group. And so then that's a lot of work. I have a lot of research and a lot of work to do to understand what do we need to do at UT to be an attractive place for this person to come? How can I set up their campus visit to demonstrate our commitment to their success, right? When I don't know this person and I can't ask them these questions, right? And so it's work. I mean, it's work and understanding bigger issues and broader perspectives, and then advocate for those issues and not just the person. I feel like I'm pretty good at advocating for people, but advocating for issues, I think, is just much harder.
Much harder. Makes sense. Thank you. How do we educate ourselves to be more aware and understanding of another's plight and still be effective in trying to bring an equality outcome? That's a tough one. Steve, you want to take a shot at that?
Yeah, Vince, I think about all of this and I look at a bigger picture. I just want people to change in general about their thought processes about people, all people. Because I don't think about the racial inequality just being a singular thing. We have people being persecuted every day for their religion to the point of being put to death. And it's just, we need change, and so you need to know history. I studied Black history in college, and which is weird to me. It should be American history, but it's told from two different points of view, and you have to know that. And I think everybody should study more about the whole history. Dr. Wanmaker talking about 150 years. This goes back a long time. I don't know that it's going to change. Religious persecution started in the beginning of the Bible and still going on today. So is this going to happen throughout mankind's life? That's more than likely going to occur because there's always that stupid, ignorant people out there that don't want to open up, don't want to listen. That goes down to your last question about talking to people. sometimes it's just not worthwhile to talk to some people. They're not going to change. They don't want to change. So, you know, you want to focus on the efforts that where we can make change. And so that's why this forum, I was excited about being part of this forum, because I wanted to share my point of view, let everybody understand, you know, where we are as an organization. I've seen tremendous change in our organization in 44 years. We're not the same department. We're a lot more female, and we're getting more minorities, but we're also getting more different cultures. You know, I have people from many different countries. My thing would be, I'd like to do our interviews behind a screen. I'd like to not know who's sitting on the other side. That completely takes out the whole perspective. I want to judge that person for their character, for their interview, and not think about anything else. I mean, at one point, Vince, we said we can't ask them what their race is or their nationality or anything else. We had to guess at it, and I was a poor guess of where people were from. And I was like, it's okay. I still want to hire this person based off of their, you know, what they've done in the interview. So I kind of put 3 questions together. Sorry about that.
No, you're fine. You're fine. And then you look at that piece of it as well, and I'll kind of go down to one of the other questions here. As an ally, how do you begin having those difficult conversations with family, friends, your community? So, Sheree, can you kind of start us with that piece of it?
Sure, Vance. And I wanted to go back just a little bit when we were talking about being an ally, and I agreed with the other panelists about truly supporting and listening, adapting to their the way that they think. And I think it's very important also that we know that you have to become comfortable with being uncomfortable when you decide to be an ally. Also, I wanted to point out that, you know, at TDOT, we have a diversity roundtable committee, and that committee consists of employees from different backgrounds and cultures. And within that committee, we talk about diversity initiatives. We get feedback on diversity. We talk about any concerns or potential problems that we identify within our department. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't say, if anyone's interested in really participating in having these open conversations and trying to help to come up with some resolutions, then just contact me and we will get you involved. But in getting back to the question in which you asked me, I think it's just important to just talk about it. I think it's important to just ask your friends and the families, you know, how do you feel about what's going on in the communities? I think it's important. I think everyone could be an ally, but I think it's important that we also have allies with our families, with our communities. And being an ally, I feel that it's a long time effort, a lifetime effort that really requires a lot of work. But just it's important to just talk about what's going on, how one feels, and promote love and acceptance and awareness.
Thank you. Jermaine, how you think we have those kind of conversations with family, friends, and community to kind of get things going?
I was kind of lucky. So before coming to state government, I worked for a private sector company that allowed me to work in different countries around the globe or whatever. And so that alone kind of brought people to me to ask questions. And it opened up conversations that others may not have had a chance to have, right? And it was surprisingly that people have questions about things or have they're uncomfortable about things, and just don't know how to talk about it. So you have to make yourself, you have to be available. That's the first thing. The worst conversation is the one you don't have. So make yourself available and open to conversation. Let people know that, you know, that I'm willing to have a difficult conversation. And as long as we have some ground rules established about respecting each other during the conversation, that we can talk about topics that may be uncomfortable. And once you get to that point, then you can start affecting change, because people aren't afraid of what they say to you, and you aren't afraid of how you respond, as long as respect is kept in line. And those conversations lead to some interesting insight. I mean, the time I spent in India gave me the perspective. This may sound kind of odd, but I got an opportunity, I think, to know what it feels like to be a white person in America. An American in India felt like being what I would imagine it feels to be white in America. And so my perspective on what it is and what it takes and where to go with those conversations changed a bit there. But everyone I know is not going to have a chance to go work in a third world country, or going to go spend years of time in, you know, in Germany or wherever doing whatever. So I have to be able to relay those experiences I had there to help people maybe get some perspective on what it's like and how to reach people here.
Makes sense. So what do you guys think, and I'm base this off to everybody, so I'm going to go down the line here. What do you think are kind of the next steps to kind of raise the bar, so to speak, and really kind of transform your organization? I'm kind of speaking about TDOT right now, but you know, what is it that, you know, can really kind of raise up our expectations as individuals? And because at the end of the day, it's us individually having to kind of effectuate change. What is it that we need to do to kind of start transforming our community and then also our workspaces here? Dr. Ivey, I'm going to pick on you first and let you kind of start us off with that.
Okay. So I think it's creating opportunities for learning. And that's both informal settings and formal settings. So providing those venues for people to exchange ideas and to celebrate diversity. You know, I think the diversity fair that TDOT holds is a perfect example of something that really helps to build awareness and understanding of each other's cultures. And so it's things like that, but it's also formal training opportunities. One good example that we learned about through this project was a program called Ouch. And a lot of DOTs around the country are starting to take a look at this, because what it does is it provides a way for people to learn how to have those difficult conversations and how to say, you know, hey, that was something that I found kind of hurtful, but I know that maybe you didn't mean it that way. And so it's helping people first to always assume good intent, and then helping to educate one another about how do I perceive what you're saying, and so what are you really saying to me when you say that? And so helping to build those conversations and really transform the organization, I think, through learning opportunities is crucial.
Great, thank you. Bridget, what's your thoughts on how we can transform as individuals, but also as a community? Yeah.
I definitely like what Dr. Ivey said, and I do also agree that we need to continue to have these very uncomfortable conversations. I think that's one of the biggest things that we can do to change, because we got to talk about it. I think for too long, the issues of race and racism have been issues that we don't really want to talk about on a realistic level. In my time at Belmead, of course, that's a plantation museum. I'm a Black girl giving tours about slavery on a plantation in 2020. So I've had many, many uncomfortable conversations, but those are the conversations that are necessary. And you have to be willing to listen to the people that are giving the information. I can't give you information and then you negate that thought because that's not your experience. You have to be willing to listen to understand, not listen to reply.
Makes sense. Giuliana, what's your thoughts on that?
I think that one of the most progressive things that an organization could do is focus on diversity and putting effort into building unity and an inclusive environment. And a great example of this is the diversity research project that Dr. Ivey leads, really to find the best strategies for TDOT in recruiting, hiring, and retaining minorities and women. And we recognized that as an organization, we were not meeting our affirmative action goals of 26% females and 23% minorities. And I think the project data and the report that comes out will hold us as an organization accountable for our commitment to diversity and our responsibility to ensure that TDOT is inclusive throughout the entire state. And for me as an HR representative, the research results are going to introduce new strategies to help our efforts in recruiting and hiring and retention, and for us to truly focus on how we can encourage a state culture for minorities and females at TDOT. And it's a small step, and I'm excited that I was able to have a small part of it with Dr. Ivey, but I think that this is a step in the right direction and something that we'll continue to focus on for years to come.
Great. Dr. Wanmaker, what do you think is kind of the next steps that we need to kind of look at to kind of transform your organization, your persons individually, as they kind of look at society as a whole?
Well, I'll give you an example of what we're doing in our office. And I know you asked me to transform society, but I'm not sure I can do that. I'll tell you what we're doing in the economics department at UT. So we are an all-white faculty. That's a topic for another day. Diversity in economics often looks like gender diversity. I mean, to have a female on faculty is kind of remarkable, as Stephanie was saying about engineering sometimes too. But what we did was we put together a book club. And following the lots of suggestions about what books you should read. And so we chose one of those books and we made it voluntary. And so there are 7 people, and we meet every Tuesday over lunch on Zoom. And it includes one member of our faculty who is retiring next year and one member of our faculty who is coming on board in August. So it spans the entire age range. And it is remarkable. I think, honestly, the way I'm thinking about it is it's helping us practice to have the next more difficult conversation. I think a lot of people are scared to sit down and have like the real conversation. And so this is giving us, including me, who has a career in race and economics, it's giving me a lot of information that I otherwise didn't have. And I remember 2 weeks ago, we were sitting and discussing the book, and somebody said, I have always wondered what this phrase means, and now I know. And everybody on the call said, me too, right? So it's just been better than I could have expected. And I think all of us feel empowered to now have the next hardest conversation, right? So when the next one comes, or if we have a meeting in the fall to talk about, hiring a candidate this year, and this year, we're going to do it. We're going to hire a diverse candidate if it kills us. I think we'll all just be better equipped to do that. Gotcha.
Yeah. So what book did you guys choose?
We're reading How to Be an Anti-Racist.
Great.
Which is great. I mean, it's just great. And as economists, like, we are social scientists. So a lot of the things he's talking, if you've read it, I mean, it's just wonderful. But a lot of the things he's talking about are things that we connect to in a professional level too. We see these data, we understand these data. And so we're having professional conversations as well. And it's just been really good.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Wanmaker. Well, folks, we've come to the end of our hour here. I do want to respect everybody's time and efforts here. And thank you all, for all you participants, but also thank you, panelists. Thank you for taking out the hour and few minutes in your day to come and join us and share your experiences and your knowledge here. It has been a great opportunity, and now you guys have a new family here in diversity that you can kind of reach out to a little bit and talk to as well. Again, thank you all. We are going to go ahead and close up for today. And again, let's try to be better to do better with diversity. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thanks, Vince.
Thank you.